A literary work's meaning can change over time as new underlying themes pertaining to that literary work come to light. The new meanings found in a text could be via the intention of the author, as in the case with a lot of texts in which the underlying themes aren't necessarily uncovered at the height of the book's release or reception. However, there can be moments in which stylistic features of the text went underdeveloped in reviewing or analyzing the many ways in which the text represents itself and its purpose. There can also be references made to other areas of knowledge that are more relevant to ideas presented in the text that weren't necessarily relevant earlier in the analysis of the text. And this can bring a new meaning to light that is in fact more dominant than the idea that was previously most popular or most synonymous with the purpose of the text. Concurrent events can also lay the foundation for new meaning to be found within a text, as the newfound relevance in relation to the ongoings of the everyday world could bring new meaning to light, or perhaps give it more influence in regards to its relation to the text. An example of new meanings coming about as a result of connections to other areas of knowledge include that of ideas presented in Oedipus, which were originally related to other prominent ideas present in a great deal of Greek tragedies, such as catharsis, as well as emotion dealing with fatal flaws. And perhaps one of the most prominent features within Greek tragedies, and especially within Oedipus, that created its initial meaning was the notion of fate and how that interacted with the character's fatal flaw. Fate is defined as the will or principle of determining cause by which things in general are believed to come to be as they are, or events to happen as they do. Everyone has a path for them created by the gods, and to go against that is not only taboo, but to no avail. This is as if to say that the gods, in laying a foundation for human civilization, have made it so that every individual within society is to undergo a certain development as a person, and therefore to go against that would only anger them, as well as the fact that it is futile to do so, as one's fate is set in stone. It is that idea of being unable to escape fate that assisted in creating Oedipus's meaning of the power and omnipotence of the gods in creating destiny for the people of Thebes and for the people of ancient Greece. This is seen in the text and how in large parts of the story the chorus often calls upon the gods to rectify the mistakes made by man for going against one's fate, such as Jocasta and Oedipus choosing to go against their fate in attempting to defy the prophecy given to them upon Oedipus's birth. The parallelism of the oracle Delphi and her prophecies driving a great deal of the character's actions also goes to show how serious prophecies and the whole notion of fate is to the people of ancient Greece. And when Oedipus and Jocasta and King Laius fail to go against the prophecy, it is made all the more clear to the audience the idea that fate is indeed inevitable, and whatever path that an individual is set upon, they are committed to such a path despite whatever actions they may take despite that. And that is ultimately the larger meaning presented initially within Oedipus. This is also emphasized with the addition of the aforementioned tragic flaw, which is the protagonist's error or flaw that leads to a chain of plot actions culminating in a reversal from their good fortune to bad. What qualifies as the error or flaw can include an error of judgment, a flaw in character, or sin. A subsection of tragic flaw includes hubris. Hubris is a personality quality of extreme or foolish pride or dangerous overconfidence. In its ancient Greek context, it typically describes behavior that defies the norms of behavior or challenges the gods, and which in turn brings about the downfall or nemesis of the perpetrator of hubris. The reason this is prominent within the text is because the largest character flaw present is that of ignorance. This is seen in the constant juxtaposition between light and dark, wisdom and foolishness, that ultimately leads Oedipus and Jocasta to their doom, as in attempting to avoid fate, as in attempting to avoid prophecy, they find that they are simply only finding bliss in their ignorance and in their foolish actions. Which then sends the message to the audience that it is all the more futile to try to go against fate or to try to go against the God's will. With that being said, the new meaning that has perhaps come out of Oedipus as a result of time is that of the Oedipus complex, which involves the underlying of themes of Oedipus in conjunction with larger themes of philosophy. The Oedipus complex in psychoanalytic theory can be defined as a desire for sexual involvement with the parent of the opposite sex and a concomitant sense of rivalry with the parent of the same sex, a crucial stage in the normal developmental process. Already, this differs from what was deemed as perhaps the more prominent original meaning of the text, which is the role of fate, and how to escape that is to ultimately defy what you have committed to since birth. What the Oedipus complex instead claims the meaning to be is to portray a curse, or rather an affliction, that most, if not all, children go through during their developmental periods of life, which is that eventually a son or a daughter is likely to have affectionate feelings towards their mother or father and have resentment towards the parent of the opposite sex, simply as a result of coming of age. And there are references to this made within the text, perhaps the most explicit one in Oedipus the King being when Oedipus says, "Why should man fear, since chance is all in all for him, and he can clearly foreknow nothing? Best to live lightly as one can, unthinkingly. As to your mother's marriage bed, don't fear it. Before this, in dreams too, as well as oracles, many a man is lain with his own mother, but he to whom such things are nothing bears his life most easily." It is within that quote that Oedipus says, "Don't fear it," as if to say this notion of laying with one's mother, as well as the rejection of one's father for a male child, is natural. And via psychoanalytic theory, this was then taken up as the primary message being told by the book, as if to say such natural desires are to be expected, and it is instead the action that creates conflict within a society. Within the graphic novel Persepolis, the meaning changes over time as well, to at first exemplify contrasting views regarding religion and behavior, to instead representing a more general outlook over how it is people grow up. The immediate message or meaning portrayed by Marjane Satrapi's graphic novel is to highlight that while there are differences between Iran and the Western world with regards to religion and views in relation to gender and behavior, to generalize the actions of a few Iranians in antagonizing Western civilization, one reduces the hardships of the Iranian people and concerning their revolution, as well as the internal turmoil that they've had to face as a result of the Iraq war and overall strife regarding different views within the state. Marjane Satrapi herself says in the introduction of the book that writing the graphic novel was so important to her because she believes an entire nation should not be judged by the wrongdoings of a few extremists. I also do not want those Iranians who lost their lives in prisons defending freedom, who dies in the war against Iraq, who suffered under various repressive regimes, or who were forced to leave their families and flee their homeland, to be forgotten. This shows that the initial meaning was to provide perspective into how exactly Iran has suffered and or changed as a result of such historical events such as the revolution and the new Islamic regime. Within the graphic novel itself, this can also be seen in how Images such as the ones on the screen are used to represent the ongoing hardships of the Iranian people both before, during, and after the revolution as a result of both the old and new regime. Overall, scenes of violence and peril are paralleled throughout the text as an emotional appeal to the reader to show that every civilian within Iran was a victim in one way or another, despite your political or religious leanings. However, the captions coupled with the pictures go on to act as a sort of visual syntax, so the reader has a better understanding of the events described within the text. And this emphasizes how the Iranian people, when shown as victims, are no different to those of contrasting views. However, the new meaning that has become to arise from the graphic novel is that of its role as a coming of age story. Now, firstly, it can be argued that even as a coming of age story, it still achieves the purpose of the original meaning, which is to provide perspective into the lives of Iranian citizens. However, the focus on growing up and social norms and the idea of implications regarding what it means to be an adult versus being a kid are much more focused in this interpretation when you look into what the text has to offer regarding this. This is seen in how the graphic novel presents the audience with images and pieces of text that delve into Satrapi as she is growing up. Images such as the one on the top right portray Satrapi as being particularly childish or in a stage of rebellion, often similar to that most teenagers will go through during their developmental period. The image of Satrapi smoking for the first time as well on the bottom right, in saying that it was awful but this was not the moment to give in. With this first cigarette I kissed childhood goodbye, now was a grown-up. This reflects more than anything, ironically, her childish views on the implications of smoking and what that would mean to her as she grew up, in assuming that with her first cigarette she would be made an adult or a grown-up. She thus created a sort of metaphor that only certain tasks were for grown-ups as well as only certain tasks were for children, and for her to take up smoking was her transitioning into adult, coming of age, and therefore being ready to take more responsibility for what would be asked of her as a result of the war and ongoing family issues.